My parents had always made it clear that my older brother, Daniel, was their pride and joy. He was the responsible one, the one who followed tradition, stayed close to them, and built a family early. I was the independent one, the one who moved out, worked 2 jobs, saved aggressively, and eventually bought my own duplex at 27. It wasn't easy. It came with sacrifices, late nights, and more stress than I admit. But it was mine, my investment, my safety net, my future. So when my parents casually announced one evening that Daniel and his family would be moving into the lower half of my duplex without paying a single penny, I thought I had misheard. My mother made it sound like a weather update. My father nodded like it had already been decided, like I was just being informed of a plan they had designed for my property. At first, I laughed. It was a short, confused laugh, the kind you make when you think someone is joking but aren't fully sure. They were not joking. My mother explained that Daniel was struggling, though struggling meant that they wanted to save money for a bigger house. My father added that it was my duty to support family, especially since I was fortunate enough to own property. I reminded them that owning property doesn't make someone automatically rich. I still had a mortgage. I still had maintenance costs. I still had bills like everyone else. They dismissed all of it. My parents insisted that since Daniel had a wife and 2 kids, he needed the space more than I did, and that I should feel honored to help them out without charging rent. The tone quickly shifted from suggestions to expectations. My mother started speaking about the move-in date. My father asked when I would be giving them the key. My brother chimed in through our family group chat, already planning where his kids' bunk beds would go. They were making decisions as if the duplex belonged to them, as if I had no say. Something inside me snapped. For years I had watched my parents put Daniel on a pedestal. They bailed him out when he made bad financial decisions. They praised him constantly. They ignored my accomplishments. I tried to convince myself that maybe I was exaggerating, but this situation proved everything I had tried to brush off. They did not respect me. They did not value what I had built. They simply expected me to sacrifice my hard work for their favorite child. I told them no. They acted like I had started a war. My mother immediately accused me of being cold-hearted. My father lectured me about family unity. Daniel tried guilt-tripping me by mentioning how tight their finances were, ignoring the fact that he and his wife spent money on vacations and new gadgets every few months. I stayed firm. The duplex was my investment property, and if they wanted to live there, they would have to pay rent like any other tenants. That's when everything escalated. 2 days later, my parents showed up at my house without warning. They brought food, trying to soften me up, talking as if the argument never happened. But then they slipped a piece of paper onto the table, a list of things they expected me to agree to if Daniel's family moved in. Free rent, free utilities, free parking, no complaints about noise because kids will be kids. I stared at the list, stunned. The more I read it, the clearer it became that they had never intended to negotiate. They wanted total control over my property and wanted me to feel guilty if I didn't give it. I told them again that the answer was no, and that if Daniel wanted the unit, he would need to sign a rental agreement and pay rent like any responsible adult. My parents acted betrayed, as if I had personally attacked them. My mother cried. My father told me I was just like those selfish young people. I finally asked them a simple question. If Daniel owned the duplex, would you expect him to let me live there for free? They froze. Neither could answer, because the truth was obvious. They never would have asked him. They only asked me because they assumed I would bend. After that conversation, they left in anger. My phone exploded with messages from relatives who had only heard my parents' version of the story. According to them, I was abandoning family, refusing to help children, and being greedy. No one asked me for my side. No one asked what I had gone through to own that property. No one asked how much financial pressure I was under. They just believed whatever my parents told them. A week later, I made my own move. I drafted a detailed rental agreement, fair market price, clear terms, everything legally sound. Then I sent it to Daniel and told him that if he still wanted the unit, he could sign the contract. If not, I would list it publicly. The silence that followed was louder than any of the arguments before. My parents were furious. Daniel refused to sign. In the end, they backed out completely. But the strangest thing happened after that. Instead of feeling guilty, I felt relieved. For the first time, I had drawn a boundary and stuck to it. And underneath all the conflict and noise, there was something peaceful about finally choosing myself. they expected me to support my brother forever, but everything shifted the moment I showed them the contract. Before that day, my parents had acted as though my property, my finances, and even my future were just extensions of their plans for Daniel. For as long as I can remember, he had been the one they placed all their hopes and dreams on. When he wanted something, the whole family shifted to make it happen. When I wanted something, it was seen as a phase, a hobby, or an unnecessary complication. Buying a duplex had been one of the biggest achievements of my life, and instead of celebrating, my mother had said, "Good, now you can help your brother out." She had meant it then, and she meant it even more now. After I sent Daniel the rental contract, the atmosphere in the family shifted. My parents treated the document like a betrayal. They claimed I was treating Daniel like a stranger, like a business transaction, instead of family. But the truth was that I had always been treated like the family outsider, and the moment I stood up for myself, the truth became undeniable. For days, I tried to stay calm. I ignored the guilt-tripping messages. I muted the family group chat. I focused on work and pretended the situation didn't weigh on me, even though it did. I knew things were coming to a breaking point when my mother showed up at my place again, but this time she was not crying or pleading. She was angry. She stormed in like she owned the place, holding the rental contract like it was some toxic waste she had accidentally touched. She didn't sit. She didn't breathe. She immediately started shouting about how I was humiliating Daniel, how I had embarrassed the family, how dare I demand money from my own blood. I stayed quiet at first, letting her speak, but something in her tone triggered the exhaustion I had been carrying for years. For too long, I had played the role of the obedient child while watching Daniel get rescued from every bad choice he made. For too long, I had been expected to shrink myself to keep the peace. This time I didn't shrink. I took the contract from her and calmly asked her to read it again, slowly, line by line. She refused, brushing me off. That was when I placed the second contract on the table, the one she had never seen before. This one wasn't for Daniel. It was for the tenants living in the other unit the year before, the couple who had always paid rent on time. I showed her the price they paid. I showed her the receipts. I showed her the maintenance costs I had carried on my own. I showed her the mortgage statements. I told her this wasn't just a building I lived in. It was an investment I had sacrificed years for. If I let Daniel live there for free, I would be losing thousands. And not just money, my security. At first, she didn't say anything. She only stared at the papers like they were written in another language. She wasn't used to hearing facts from me, only obedience. When my father arrived shortly after, the tension doubled. He had always been quieter than my mother, but his silence carried judgment like a weapon. He didn't yell. He simply said I should do what's right for the family. But what he meant was, do what benefits Daniel. I slid the contract toward him and told him that doing what's right for the family also includes protecting myself. That was when I realized something important. My parents had never seen me as an adult with responsibilities. They saw me as a resource. A backup plan. A safety net for their favorite child. My father pushed the contract back toward me and said he would not allow his grandchildren to live in a place where money comes before love. I reminded him that love is not one-sided sacrifice. He didn't respond. The room felt like an emotional battlefield. My mother's anger had turned into shock, and my father's disappointment hung heavily in the air. But something in me finally settled. I wasn't afraid of their reactions anymore. I wasn't a child asking for approval. I was a homeowner protecting my hard work. A week passed. Daniel never signed the contract. He never even called me to talk about it. Instead, he let our parents fight his battle, something he had done his whole life. They eventually told me they were helping him rent another place temporarily, though I knew they could barely afford it. But they preferred struggling financially over accepting that their golden son should pay me fair rent. Despite how irrational it was, I understood something vital. This wasn't actually about the duplex. It was about their image of Daniel and their belief that I existed to support him. Even after they moved on to another apartment, the silence between us stayed heavy. I tried reaching out a few times, but every message returned cold. Eventually, something surprising happened. My aunt, who had heard everything from a distance, called me privately. She told me I had done the right thing. She told me she wished she had shown boundaries with her own siblings years ago. It was the first time someone in the family said those words to me. It didn't fix the situation, but it eased the ache. Months later, Daniel finally sent me a brief message. Not to apologize. Not to admit anything. Just to tell me they found a cheaper place and were doing fine. It was the most neutral message we had exchanged in months, but I noticed something important: it didn't come with expectations. It didn't come with guilt. It didn't come with assumptions about what I owed him. Maybe he finally understood, or maybe he didn't, but I had learned something powerful. Boundaries change relationships, but sometimes they also rebuild self-respect. And for the first time in years, I felt like my life truly belonged to me. After everything that happened with my parents and my brother, I thought the tensions in the family would slowly fade away. I assumed that once they found another place to live and adjusted to their new routine, the anger would dissolve and maybe we could return to something close to normal. But life rarely settles neatly, especially when resentment has been brewing quietly for years. I didn't know at the time that the real storm hadn't even begun. It started with a phone call from a number I didn't recognize, one that came on a calm Saturday morning while I was drinking coffee and trying to enjoy a rare moment of quiet. The voice on the other end introduced himself as an attorney. That alone was enough to make my pulse spike. My first thought was that there was some problem with the duplex, maybe a legal issue I had overlooked, maybe something related to property taxes or the refinance I had done months earlier. But the truth was far more unbelievable. My parents had attempted to file a complaint against me, claiming that I had promised the downstairs unit to my brother's family and had wrongfully denied housing to them at the last minute. The attorney told me calmly that the claim was weak and wouldn't go anywhere, but he needed to verify my side. I was stunned, not because the claim was outrageous, that part one expected, but because it made one thing very clear: my parents had not moved on. They had turned the situation into something much bigger than it was. They were trying to justify their anger by making me look like the villain. I explained everything to the attorney, sent him the contracts, screenshots of messages, and proof that there was never any agreement. He assured me again that the complaint was meaningless and would likely be dropped immediately. But the shock didn't fade. I sat there staring at my phone long after the call ended. My parents had actually tried to involve the law. They were so determined to make me look like the selfish one that they were willing to fabricate promises that never existed. A mixture of disappointment and anger washed over me. I had always known they favored Daniel, but I never imagined they would cross such a line. I didn't call them, not right away. I needed time to cool down, time to understand how to even respond. But before I could gather my thoughts, the situation escalated again, this time from another direction. My tenant in the upstairs unit, a single woman named Jessica who had lived there for nearly a year, sent me a message saying that my mother had knocked on her door asking intrusive questions. She wanted to know how much she paid for rent, what the living conditions were like, whether she thought I was a fair landlord, and whether she had ever complained about anything. Jessica was polite but confused. I, on the other hand, was furious. I drove straight to my parents' house. The moment I walked in, they acted as if nothing unusual was happening. My father watched TV. My mother sat at the dining table peeling fruit. When I confronted them, they didn't deny anything. They said they had the right to investigate how I was treating tenants because they believed I was hiding things. I asked what exactly they thought I was hiding. My mother said, without hesitation, that she believed I had offered Daniel a different deal at first but changed my mind out of jealousy. Hearing those words was like being slapped. I asked her to explain how she came to that conclusion. She said no one buys property at my age unless they're trying to show off. She said I had been acting distant for years. She said success had made me arrogant. Every accusation was more absurd than the last, but what hurt the most was the lack of faith. They truly believed the worst about me because it fit the story they had created in their minds. My father remained quiet through the argument until I finally asked him directly whether he believed I owed Daniel a free place to live. He didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "He has a family. You don't." He might as well have said, "Your life matters less than his. Your needs matter less. Your future matters less." That was the moment something inside me changed for good. Not snapped, just shifted. Like a door quietly clicking shut. I told them calmly that their behavior had gone far beyond disrespect. I told them that their lies, their attempts to manipulate the situation, and their interference with my tenant were unacceptable. I told them that if they continued to involve themselves in my personal life and my property, I would have no choice but to take legal action myself, even if it meant distancing from them permanently. My mother gasped as if I had threatened to abandon the family. My father finally looked up from the TV, shocked that I had dared speak those words. But I meant them. I left without waiting for their reply. That night, I blocked them temporarily, not out of spite, but because I needed peace. For the first time in a long time, I went to bed without feeling guilty or conflicted. I felt something new, something almost unfamiliar: freedom. Not the dramatic kind, not the cinematic kind, but a quiet, grounding freedom that comes when you finally understand your worth and set boundaries that protect your future. Weeks passed before they reached out again. This time, the tone was different. My father wrote a short message apologizing for the misunderstanding. My mother sent a longer message, still defensive but less hostile. Daniel didn't message me at all. I didn't respond immediately, and I didn't rush to fix anything. Healing doesn't happen overnight, and forgiveness doesn't erase the harm that was done. But I realized something important. My life had become clearer. My decisions were my own. My property was my own. My future was my own. And for the first time in years, that finally felt enough.